In this episode, we will take a closer look at the Hardwires, mental matter, old-mindedness, and addiction. On a cold and miserable day in Cape Town, high up on a cliff overlooking the mother city, Vivian faces her fear of heights to share a dark topic, a hardwire called mental matters.
Mental matters. It could be a primary hardwire, but it could also be a tertiary hardwire. Let's just first look what it means. Mental matters doesn't mean you're a mental case. It means we all have mental faculties, and when we are exposed to stress, then we are either going to go on the continuum between anxiety and depression. So anxiety is when your energy, your volitional energy is still high, so you are a bit in a nervous anxiety state. You can see people have got almost more energy. They talk about the anxiety of the entrepreneur. There must be a certain amount of anxiety to be having drive that propels you. It's what we call the fight response of the brain. Then the other continuum of mental matters would be depression, and that is where your volitional energy is getting less and less and less, and then you have no drive. So the more you become depressed on the depression side of the mental matter scale, the more you lose volition. So mental matters could be a primary hardwire. You could have inherited it from your parents. So if your parents were anxious and having fears and anxieties and phobias, you will definitely very likely inherit it. And when you get nurtured also with fear, don't do that, then anxieties and fears and stresses are going to start developing. And we could inherit it, and we can acquire it even more and more and exacerbate it, and then it becomes a tertiary hardwire. And remember, tertiary hardwires leads you to a very bad state of being, which prohibits you from ever getting to an optimum human being and to that purpose and to those dreams. Abuse is the biggest thing that causes more and more mental matters, so that your mental state is not stable anymore, and your anxieties and your fears and your depressions are just going up and down, causing all sorts of other conditions, bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorders, and then all the other ones, victim and bad attitude and vengeful, and also addictions could create mental disorders, and that then causes you to have it as a tertiary hardwire. So it could be primary or it could be tertiary. All other mental conditions fall under this mental matter state. So it could be not only neurosis and psychosis, but it could also be like a memory loss that leads to Alzheimer and dementia, and maybe in the beginning psychosomatic conditions like hypochondriac eventually turns into that mental matter state that pivots between the anxiety and the depression. Now we know that war and big traumas cause post-traumatic stress syndrome, and that creates big problems, and people eventually die with that disorder, and they just have to use medication to cope with that because the adrenaline and cortisol in their blood is just too high, and they've got to take medication with serotonin in to neutralize that state. So mental matters could also be then going from just anxieties and anxiety disorders to, we call it neurosis. It can then digress into psychosis, like schizophrenias and those type of mental disorders.
This hardwire can lead to the emergence of mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, bipolar, fibromyalgia, and OCD. Widespread pain conditions like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome are social conditions, since their symptoms have a direct impact on the patient's ability to maintain various roles and identities. Ties to the outside world are withered away, and physical and psychological isolation increases. In the next insert, Danica Kuhn and Kelly Jade shares with us their experience of living with fibromyalgia.
It felt as somebody put me through a crusher, emotionally, physically. I was busy losing everything I worked so hard for. I was there where I was unable to get out of bed for months, where I turned to somebody that was not me. You do not have this disease, you do not understand. You cannot comprehend the pain that somebody's going through.
And like in high school is when I started drinking extremely heavily because I was in so much pain all the time and I was so unhappy and I was so depressed.
If your body sees as your body sees. And the cruelty of fibromyalgia is it's up and down.
It comes in bouts and waves. You don't really know when it's going to really hit.
Tomorrow I can have a beautiful day. The next day I can't walk. That causes severe depression. And you lose your self-worth completely.
That was very difficult because I've always been very independent and very headstrong, saying that my illness will never take me down, but it will, it does, and there's nothing I can do about it except try and live my best happy life.
That I can do it, I can stand up, I have to do this, let's just screw it. Done, finished.
I just couldn't handle emotions, I couldn't handle pain, I couldn't handle the depression.
I was done. I didn't want to live anymore. Not for my family, not for me. And I didn't see a way out.
We're living in a virtual reality modern world where we don't know what is the truth anymore. We just see chaos everywhere. We have stresses, we have digital technologies, we've got social media that blows up the celebrities to make us feel inferior. This is really affecting our sense of self and our feeling of we are okay and we are safe. So we lock us up in fancy little soft living homes because of our feeling of unsafe and not okay. How does this affect us in our lives? What is happening to us? If we have the ability to open up our head and open up our inside and our gut, we will see that actually since you were a child, you were exposed to so many stresses. Maybe you were abused, you were carrying those anxieties and those stresses in your body. And what happened inside the body? Adrenaline. Every time you get stress and strains, adrenaline secretes in your body. Because that is the natural reaction for the body to actually make you ready to jump over a fence. Nowadays, we don't release that adrenaline. It sits in our body, it stays in our body. So where does the adrenaline go? It infiltrates into your muscles and into your fibers. Arthritis, it sits in your adrenal glands. It takes over your neck, it creates spasms. It slowly but surely causes autoimmune diseases. It puts you into a state where you are so fatigued and where you don't have longevity and you don't have vitality. And when we ask you, come, let's go jump in that cold swimming pool, then you'll have 5 million excuses why it's right for things to be wrong. Our Hardwire assessment scale shows that between 60 and 70% of the population is showing growing old-mindedness. People are not having vitality and longevity anymore. And what are they doing about it? They are suffering. We find more and more people at a young age just lying. They can't lift up their arms and their feet anymore. And they feel valueless. They've lost their value. Do you want that to happen to you? You've got to think about this. If it's something that resonates with you now, you have to immediately change your life. You can't just let it slip. When it's too late, then it is too late. So what are we going to do about it? You are either in the wrong ecosystem, the wrong environment, an environment that is just bringing that stress, and you are weaker than that environment. You're not able to get that environment turned around. You've got to get out of that environment. You've got to get out of every piece of your life, everything you do that is creating the adrenaline and the cortisol. and you must now start doing things that is more 3 and 4 dimensional, more creative, more happy things, more nature things. You've got to secrete happy hormones. It has to be a whole transformational change that you've got to choose to do. We are made to live healthy. You see, some people, they are still healthy until the day they die. Let's reverse our lives because we can.
In most cases, addiction stems from unfavorable and destructive situations such as unconducive parenting and abuse. These addictive patterns, however, trickles down from generation to generation. Professor Slabbert elaborates.
Addiction might have a connection with some or the other kind of inheritance, but I want to look at addiction in a different way. Addiction is not the primary problem. Addiction is the result of an attempt to solve a problem. It is basically a adaptive response of a child that had to endure one or the other kind of trauma. If I would now just become abusive towards you, what would your response be? Well, what are your options? You might be saying to me, don't talk to me that way. Or you might stand up and walk away. Or you might look at the people around and, ask them to help you in this situation. And that is all fine. But what will happen if you cannot fight it, not escape it, and not change it? Then you will engage into a behavior to relieve you from the pain. And that behavior would be very likely the use of a substance or another kind of behavior like gambling, sex, eating, or whatever kind of behavior that gives you relief and perhaps joy, but relief from the pain. You will therefore crave this behavior in the short term, and in the longer term it may carry negative consequences, but you later on do not worry about the negative consequences that might follow. But let's look at an infant. The child in infancy is incredibly sensitive to stimuli, and especially stimuli which is the cause of behavior that is not as it used to be. And in that sense, the question is, what are the options of the child? This child in infancy cannot escape, cannot fight, and cannot change the situation. So what will happen to the child? If the adult's brain will tune out under these circumstances, the same will happen to the child, because the child cannot escape, cannot fight, and cannot change the situation. And when does this happen? This happens when the child feels, I am not okay. And it also happens at that particular point in time of the brain's development. And because the brain is developing, this kind of tuning out of the brain as a response then becomes programmed into the brain. And the foundation for addiction of the child has been laid. But we want the child to become addicted in a certain sense. Why and how? Well, if we confront the child with a real-life challenge that is so demanding that it requires great effort to engage, to keep and task, and eventually to resolve the challenge, then the brain acts as a self-rewarding system by secreting the happy hormones. But the happy hormones are secreted in the exact amount that will not make the child addicted to it. But what it will do is that the happy hormones ignites the volition of the child, and volition is the foundational energy that the child needs to become addicted to resolve challenge after challenge after challenge.
So tell me about your addictions.
I've got 3 addictions, alcohol and drugs, which I've been clean for now a year and 3 months, but I'm still struggling with self-harm. Self-harm's obviously the longest. I started in 1997 and I'm still struggling with that. I grew up in a home, single parent, and the relationship was just not well, and I tried so many times to actually commit suicide, but never went through. And yeah, I just thought of a plan. What else can I do? Because at that stage there was an internet and whatever, and I just sat with a ruler and a lighter and I started lighting it up and hurting myself. And then later it became a blade, like those carpet knives, started cutting, and it really I felt like it helped. It numbed the pain, it escaped from the situation. And
So how is it an addiction? What are you addicted to about it?
like say I receive a nasty voice note, or someone's rude, or some bad news or whatever, then I'm like, okay, that just, you know, I just must do it.
So it's when you feel I'm not okay, something that triggers you to feel you're not okay, and then you go ahead with it. But it starts already much earlier, where you start planning it in your brain that you want to do it. You want to do it, and then you know you shouldn't do it, and then it still doesn't happen, and then something happens and triggers it, and then you think, yes, I'm not okay, I have to do it. So are you still doing it?
I have relapsed, so yes, and yeah, it can become every day, just like any other addiction.
Is that what is on your arm? Can you show us what is that?
That is some
So-
of it.
So why would you choose your arm?
I wouldn't, because I usually choose my legs. I don't know if you. So it's.
Sure. So you initially chose your legs. Now why is it's a bit infected there? What did you do there?
I take some deodorant and spray it on, and then
Why?
because it burns like hell.
So you want deeper pain. You want
Yes.
more pain, more pain, more pain.
Yes.
Now don't you think
And
people,
if it doesn't become enough, like it's not burning enough, like you did once, then you know you try again, it's not. That's why you need a new scar too.
and you need to get to a certain type of pain level to stop. Otherwise you feel it's not really working. You've got to get more. It's like drinking more or taking a drug that is now stronger.
I suppose, yes, yeah.
And during the time you do that, your brain is totally unconscious. And then do you get yourself into a state of consciousness after that? Because that's obviously a state of unconsciousness in that moment. Just like alcohol, or like when I take a Noga and I eat up the whole thing. I don't think until I've done it, and then I realize, oh, look how many calories it's going to make me fat. It's just another addiction. But you are unconscious of it in the moment. Then when you've done it, do you go conscious about it? And then how does your brain then go?
For instance, with the arm, I would think, now why the freak did you choose your arm? Because in my thinking, I was like, okay, no one can see. But I mean, when you drink coffee, you're going to see it.
Yeah.
When you wear a top like this, you're going to see it. On your legs is the safest because you can't see it. But there's just not space anymore. And the pain is not the same anymore because wound over wound.
You can't feel it anymore. You don't have the same threshold. So you need new pain. New fresh wound, new pain.
Yes. I've even, tried here, or here, you know, it's different. But, and I also know sometimes where to go where it's not too bloody, but sometimes it's just the gemors. That's why the burning is a bit better, but then you have the infection problem.
Once again, we can see the importance of the transformational principles of OI.